Hello and welcome to Talking China, the show where we talk to people with unique perspectives and unrivaled knowledge about the main talking points in China today. The two sessions is always a hotbed of talk about China's diplomacy, and this year has been no different. From China's role as a stabilizing force in the world to relations with the United States and the growing voice of the Global South. To discuss these issues and more, we're going to be talking to Professor Li Chung, the founding director of the University of Hong Kong's Contemporary China and the World Center, Professor Liu Zhejin, senior fellow at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University, and our very own Li Jingjing, CGTN reporter, who attended the Foreign Minister's press conference at the two sessions.
Hi everyone, I'm Li Jingjing, a journalist with CGTN. It's the 6th year for me to cover the two sessions. I also visited many Global South countries, interviewed many scholars, politicians, key opinion leaders from these regions. So later in the conversation, I will try to bring those African, Asian, and Latin American voices in the debate.
Thanks, Jingjing. So let's kick things off with debate topic 1. Is China trying to change the international order? China's fundamental diplomatic approach may seem like common sense to many people, trying to give all countries an equal voice, being against war, conflict, in favor of peace and negotiation, supporting developing countries. But there's still a lot of confusion and, in some places, a little cynicism about the true intent of China's diplomacy. We've got an article from the Washington Post here that argues that China is seeking to create a multipolar world, offering an alternative order to one led by the United States, with a headline saying that China is pushing to build a new world order. Now, it's fair to say that China and the US have very different views about how the world should be run. But while China has been a vocal advocate of what it calls true multilateralism and against hegemonism, is it really true, Professor Li, that China wants a multipolar world, and what does it think it can get out of it?
Well, of course, that China constantly emphasizes multipolarity and multilateralism. Now, to answer your question, is China going to change the international order? Well, first, ironically, the so-called liberal international order collapsed in recent years, and especially the recent weeks, particularly evident in the United States and also in Europe. This is not caused by China, probably rather caused by the United States and its relation with, in terms of cross transatlantic relations. Now, if international order, you refer to UN-led rule-based order, no, China does not want to change it. China, just like some other countries, emphasize that the importance of the UN at this critical moment in world history. Now, if you also ask if it's the globalization, I think China is the country really have a strong support for economic globalization, because China benefit along with some other countries about the economic globalization. Now, but if you ask that if the order is what President Trump favored, like American first and or unilateralism, of course China has reservation. Now, if the order referred to President Biden's two blocks, namely authoritarianism versus democracy, certainly China reject that narrative. So it depends on you what you refer to as the international order. But most importantly, I think we are in a very critical moment in history. The so-called US-led liberal order basically already collapsed. Again, it's not caused by China. And of course, in a way, China's arguments to reform international order, not to completely replace one, now it's stronger and clearer than ever before.
Thank you, Professor Li. Professor Liu, so what does China think it can get out of a multipolar world? Why does China want a multipolar world?
That's an interesting question, but my answer is quite simple. I should say this is a question between demand and the supply side, whether the demand in the global community need to change the global order. If there is a necessity to change it, I think there's a supply side. So this is a really very important thing. So similar as Professor Li already mentioned here, that always we're trying to talk about the order at the moment. But do we think there's a necessity to change today's order? And who can be responsible to take this responsible or the function to make the global order in a different way. So if we can answer this fundamental question, I think the answer is clear. In my opinion, I think that China, I think, has never tried to change the global order at the present, but it's decided by something else. For instance, if the Western countries made the order in a different way, unilateral, hegemonious, or some bullying the action taken. So if we follow this order, I think, including China, all over the world is willing to change it. So, but I want to say that China is not going or is not trying to change the global order at the present. We just try to modify, to improve the present order. Because at the moment we have already UN and also other international organizations that the government make the world governance. So in principle, they are quite welcomed by the world. But in some aspects, especially in the economic and geopolitical tension, something that always disordered by United States and by some NATO, or for instance, by some major European countries. For under such circumstances, there is a necessity and a demand from the market that such order should be changed, should be modified. So this is no doubt this is a good question, but who should take this responsibility? I don't think China will take this responsibility. China is only one part of the globalization. China is willing to help the rest of the world to make the world modified with diversified and with more opportunities to develop their own economy. So I think the question is quite simple to be cleared with all the backgrounds.
Jingjing, do you think that there's an argument that perhaps China is strengthening its existing positions, but America is moving away from its previous commitments, which is opening up a new opportunity and a new position? Based on your conversations with people in the global south and your travels, what do they say? How do they feel about the US role at the moment and China's role?
I think first, I don't know who asked those questions, but to those who asked this question, I think we need to ask, what kind of order are they referring to in this question? Because sometimes the US politicians saying the rule-based international order, which is basically a few countries use their power to dominate the majority of the world. But I don't think China is trying to change the world order. China is trying to, calling everybody, let's go back to the world order that we all agreed on, that was based on UN Charter. All the countries agreed on after World War II, because I think in the past few years we saw some countries are abusing their powers, even neglecting the UN, and follow their own rule-based international order, which is basically exploiting the majority of countries, global south countries. So if that's the order they refer to, not just China wants to change that, the whole global south wants to change that because they know it's unfair. It's basically pushing the global south people down at the bottom of the trap. So, but in terms of the world order that we all agreed on after World War II, which is based on UN Charter, that's the thing that China has always been following, and China is not trying to change that. And actually during the two sessions, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi mentioned that if every country only thinks that only achieve their own interests, put their own interests first, then we go back to the rule of jungle. Might does not equal right. So that's my thought on it.
Thank you, Jingjing. What I would like to ask the two professors is that this sounds great. It's something we can all really agree on, the basis of a kind of equality for all countries, everyone having an equal voice, a stronger voice for smaller countries, support for developing nations. But is it realistic in a world where the US is becoming more isolationist, Western Europe is a little bit confused at the moment about its role? Is this multipolar world where we're going to see greater equality really something that we're going to see in reality? Professor Li?
Well, still yet to see. We are in a rapid change with a lot of uncertainty and confusion. And for example, Jingjing mentioned about the Western countries, including the United States and Europe, constantly talk about rule-based order, but only until the end of Biden administration. I mean, if you look at the recent narrative after Trump and after Munich Security Conference, when Vice President Vance delivered that very harsh criticism of Europe, and the point that the fact that European countries become like problems rather than the allies. So the whole thing is gone. So I think it's too early to answer a question about the multilateral kind of norm will prevail. But one thing is, I agree with Professor Liu that China now more than any time before emphasized global governance. I think the keyword governance previously is also frequently used by United States and Western country, but also now sounds like also that term also threw out the window. So again, we are in rapid change. Sometimes it's really astonishing to see how quickly U.S.-led ally now talk about the possible collapse of NATO, collapse of transatlantic relations. So I think that we should put in that perspective. But the fact is that it's not unipolar, not bipolar, not even three kind of kingdom Chinese tend to obsess, or some other country tend to obsess. But I think that we really enter the polar. There's more than three polars, and maybe four, maybe five, and or even more. So that's raised the issue about how to govern in this kind of the new situation, new economic, political, security landscape.
Yeah, I mean, there is an argument, maybe a bit of a stretch, that the US and China are on somewhat different roads, if going by different means and traveling in different ways with different intents. But we may end up in the kind of multipolar world we've been talking about by a kind of strange accident of the Trump return to the White House. So topic 2 is, does China belong to the developing world or to the global south? This is a debate that's entered the media discourse recently as the global south has grown in importance in the world and its voice has become louder, and also as China has become a greater economic power. We have an article here from Foreign Policy in which an argument is made that China's sheer size, high levels of GDP, trade, investment, and increasingly innovation and successful military modernization mean that it now qualifies as a great power. By definition, a great power cannot be part of the global south. Now, the idea that China is not a member of the global south was strongly refuted by Foreign Minister Wang Yi at the press conference on the sidelines of the two sessions. He referred back to the shared history of being subject to colonialism in particular. But Professor Liu, China has become a huge economic power over the past few decades, the past 45 years. Is it still fair to say it's a member of the global south?
I think when we make the decision which country should belong to the global south, is not only from the economically result. We know that China's GDP is the second largest. Also, there is one big power in the economic development. But this is not the single or only one requirement or criteria to make judgment, because it's a complexity or combination of different categories. For instance, political system, from the economic system, culture, education, healthcare, also the infrastructure in different fields. So it's a combination of different factions and factors, not only from GDP figure. From GDP figure, China, okay, it's superpower. It belongs to the second largest. There's no doubt. It's not a developing country, but actually China is really a developing country. We cannot say China or look at China only Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, or even Wuhan. Nowadays in Hangzhou, we can see that's so well developed from infrastructure, from education, from healthcare. That is also already very modernized. But China is really a huge population, unbalanced development in the past 40 years. If you go to western part of China or even middle part of China, southwestern part of China, you can see big difference with this first tier the cities. So that's why we say, generally speaking, that China is still a developing country.
Thank you. That's a fascinating perspective. Jingjing, you've spent a lot of time talking to people, interviewing people in the Global South, from ordinary people to officials, politicians. Do people you speak to think of China as a member of the Global South?
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially, I went to some African countries and talked to a lot of African scholars, African people. You know, like what Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said during the press conference, he emphasized China is naturally a member of the Global South. And because we have a lot of shared history fighting against colonialism, hegemonism, and I can feel that when I go to Global South countries. Say when I go to African countries and interact with the African people, when they know I'm from China, they welcome me with this warm hospitality and just friendship. Because you know what? This friendship started not just in recent few years. Some countries demonize the BRI project, thinking it's just a rich China go to buying up Africa. But to African people, it's not, because this friendship can go back to the 60s, the 50s. And back then, China itself was very underdeveloped and still invest what it had in building this Tazara Railway, which is the railway connecting Tanzania and Zambia. So for that friendship, Global South people really value China as forever as their brother. So of course, with this shared history, we are always a member of Global South. We also have a common goal in the future, which is building a fair world order, which is fair to the Global South developing countries. And China also promised China will always be the pillar of the justice, speaking for the justice of the Global South. So that's what I feel as someone from China traveling to all those Global South countries. And also I agree with Professor Liu mentioned, this GDP, you cannot just judge how developed this country is just based on this average income or GDP. As we know from some developed countries, GDP is high, average income is high, but does that mean everybody have life is much better, or the money is controlled by just maybe 12 people? So in China, I think from the work report, it's really very, very clear. China wants to reduce the gap, the wealth gap between regions and also between people. China committed to invest more money in developing the rural regions to make sure the development fruit can be shared by everyone in this country. So for that reasons, I think China is definitely the member of the Global South.
Professor Li, in pure political terms, why is it important for China to be seen to be part of the Global South?
My view is to call the things in a real name. China is already second largest economy. China's GDP per capita already make a significant change. Look at just 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So I have the reservation with this kind of narrative. I think that it's not the right way to approach the global tensions. So again, this is my view. I understand. Chinese constantly think they were still developing country, but I think from the outside world, whether Global South or whether Western country, they just confuse with that term.
Mm-hmm.
So developing countries, Global South members, Professor Liu, are happy to work with China, cooperate with China, work as partners under the Belt and Road, under the 3 global initiatives within BRICS, within SCO, and China is happy to work with them. Does the label of Global South really matter?
Yeah, that's a good question, but that shows that China is a country that with full responsibility. As we always mentioned or announced, that China is not only working for our own prosperity, we hope that to help the rest of the world. That's why China has enough efforts and power that to establish different organizations like BRICS or like some Shanghai 20 or other organizations to make all this investment along the Belt and Road Initiative. All this is just to try to make that the rest of the world that at the same time with the common prosperity with China, because China will not like to wait or to waste the time or to wait for another 20 years that when the other countries come up. No, this is not the principle, not the way of, or not the Chinese philosophy. That's why China is always trying to make the same progress with the rest of the world. That's why China that has made extra effort. Even we know that for Belt and Road Initiative investment is huge. And also we have infrastructure project, we have AIIB, this banking financing systems also to support all these projects. That's for the purpose that we hope that the global South can come up together with the same speed, the same prosperity, like President Xi Jinping said that no country should be allowed to be left. That means exactly like the domestic in China, that all these poorest, extremist poverty people that should be also eliminated, should be reduced. No one allowed to be left. This is the similar policy that when we out towards the outside of China. So does not mean that China has strong enough as already developed country, because China has spent its money, spent its effort to save for the rest of the world. So this is the different way as the United States they had. And also all this assistance and the project that China has proposed has no any political preconditions or political requirements on the local governments, just for the benefits and how to improve the living standard of the local people. Because why we do say, many countries, even they said that China is quite stupid. You say you are not so totally real rich, but you still spend a lot of money for the rest of the world. For what reason? Because China has similar sovereigns before, 70 years, 80 years before that, from the colonialism, from the poverty, from the suppression by the imperialism. So we know that the sufferings and disasters that people are having. So that's why we have the same feeling that we wish to help the rest of the world to get a better life as soon as possible, as better as possible. This is really what we are thinking.
Can I jump in? Because I feel like I doubt the intention of the question. Because by asking that, I feel like they are trying to separate China from global South countries, its brothers. So because China has always been saying we are a member of the global South. Global South countries think China is one member of the global South. But it's the global North saying, well, you're not a global South. So it's kind of like a textbook divide and conquer strategy, trying to separate China from its buddies and friends. And also, it's kind of like those who ask questions about is China still socialism or capitalism? Because China has been saying we are practicing socialism. We are socialism with Chinese characteristics. That's how we developed. But when you were less developed, when you were poor, the global North tend to say, well, you are poor, you are backward because you are socialism. Now China is much better off. With cutting-edge technology, they say, "Oh, you're rich because you adopted capitalism." So they're trying to credit everything to themselves, to their system. So I feel like I doubt the intention of this question, but my message to my Global South fellows and Chinese fellows is, don't be distracted by questions like this. Don't forget our past, our history, our shared goals in the future. So just stick it to ourselves. Just believe what we believe in.
Yeah, I mean, what matters at the end of the day is that China and these countries are working together, and as Professor Liu said, to improve lives. And there's all kinds of other things that go on around that, and every country is different. But fundamentally, then we can see what's happening in practice. I'm not sure it matters. Do we that we label for most of the world, we put a label on it. What's important is what's actually happening. And what's happening is generally a positive thing as far as we can see. So let's move on to our third debate topic now.
One thing should be emphasized because many misunderstandings in the world that even especially in the European countries they say that China is willing to stay as a member of global South, just is willing to have some advantage, to enjoy more advantage from the developed countries. I told them it's nonsense. What advantages that you have given to the global South countries? I mean the Western countries, especially the G7 or the other the developed countries. So also China developed its economy not only according to the political system, but it's according our own policy, very realistic, that they meet the needs of the people, meet the needs of the economic concrete condition. That's why we say that the demand is already get satisfied with the supply chain. So in this two sides, that China's economic development has really developed in a very fast way. But from other side, we still a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of things to do, that a long way to go. For instance, politically, also from the cultural education side, also healthcare, aging society also. All these problems should be really further recognized by more efforts. That is not a simple job or easy job for any government administration at the moment. So that's a global South. I think they are also to see the number two in the super economic power of China. They cannot make any compare with China's standard, but I think they should understand us very well that only if China can develop it so good with the same conditions as they had nowadays, I think they should have more confidence for their future. Because if China can do it, if China can achieve it, we can do it also. So this is the very simple reason that China should remain as the one member of the global South, because in reality, China is still very, very poor, very weak in some areas, especially. So I hope that this situation, of course, in my personal idea, that I hope China could be announced that tomorrow we are a developed country. We are not a global South. We are already advanced country. But the reality is not so easy. It's not true. So we should come to the reality.
Well, I disagree with the perception China is very poor. And with that one, I don't think the world, whether it be the West or whether it be the South, look at China in that light. And also that it does have the, if you are a developing country, it does have the WTO, kind of special treatment. And of course, that for China, maybe that treatment become far less important, but still, there's some of the standards and the norms differ between a developing country and developed country. I think that that's a fact. Now, again, that I understand that again from the historical perspective and from China's own identity and China's sense of to support the global South. But also we do need to know that some other developed countries like Japan also provide tremendous foreign aid for developing countries. So it's not only China. China did well in the African Summit and some other things, but some of the developed countries also reach out to provide help. In this regard, I think China and other countries maybe learn from each other. But I think that when the country reaches a certain level of development, it's our responsibility to help those countries behind. This, I think, it's government policy in Beijing. I think the Chinese public also need to support that idea rather than just think we are a developing country. Therefore, that not only in the geopolitical interest, but even in the economic reality, it's really, if we believe win-win, if we believe that kind of infrastructure development can benefit others, I think that we do need to rethink all these things about the South versus North, developing country and developed country, because we are in a very rapid change, not only geopolitical sense, but also economic landscape.
Thank you all again. We've once again run well over time, so I'm going to take us to the final part of the show. It's fascinating to hear your comments on maybe China needs to be a little bit more confident in talking about its successes and its achievements, not exporting, but acting as a model of what can be achieved. And also the debate about the Global South and China's self-image, fascinating stuff, and maybe something we can explore later at a later time. So we'd like to close the show with all of us giving a question to our audience or putting forward a trend to look forward to in 2025 in terms of China and diplomacy. I'll start this time. As a British person, I'm really fascinated to see how China and Britain's relationship develops over the coming year. Obviously, it's gone from a very high point in the 2012, 2011, and it's dipped. Now it's growing up again and things are getting better. So I'm fascinated to see, particularly with the American situation at the moment, how Britain and China and Britain and other European countries develop their relations over the coming year. Jingjing, do you want to go next?
Questions to the audience. That'll be interesting because I want to share stories because there's dramatic changes in China in the past 30 to 40 years. In the past 30 years, I grew from a malnourished kid to an overnourished adult. And in the past 40 years, villages in China developed equipped with affordable electricity. All these infrastructures, people were lifted out of extreme poverty. And now China is really trying to leave no one behind, but also leave no countries behind. We try to achieve this common prosperity. So it's important, how are we going to join hands to alleviate all the less privileged people, how to raise their living standards. So if we want to build this common prosperity and this community with a shared future, do you want to join us? That's my question to you.
Thank you, Jingjing. Professor Liu?
Yes, I hope that in the rest of the time and all over the world have a shared future. As we always mention, this is our value, that we should build up a shared future, because China's role in the international affairs and the global governance is very constructive, is very innovative, and also very important for all over the world. So China's function is very important, cannot be replaced by any other countries. So I hope China will be further more prosperous, and I hope the audience can have more chances that if they are coming mainly from Hong Kong or from the outside of China, you should come to China to see it. I mean that the best policy for the last year is that we have free visa for many visitors from outside. They can see many things in reality by their own eyes without any propaganda. So we don't need to export our value, our ideology. They can see by themselves. So I hope that many audience and the people that they can come to Beijing, come to Shanghai, or come to other areas in China to see the reality.
Thank you. And Professor Li?
I think that I want to ask your audience whether you live in China or in the global south or in the west. Compare China today with 40 years ago, the China 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whether China is richer or stronger now or otherwise. For me, the answer is very clear. And this could be an aspiration for Chinese or for some people friendly to China or used to be or developing country or getting better or still remain as a developing country. But it could also be fear with some countries think China's rapid rise may undermine their interest. So my main point is, if we make such a comparison, it's very, very important to have empathy. Now, the empathy is that for West, I think the Chinese, the rapid rise, it's just that they want to maintain or achieve the middle class life, just like many countries, developed countries, people are entitled, although now and not anymore, or at least for certain sectors. But for Chinese, that is very, very important to put this moment in a historical perspective, but also in the comparative perspective with other countries. Now, this overall is the key word, is empathy. 换位思考, I think extremely important. Without that, we will have an incomplete understanding of rapidly changing world.
Thank you, Professor Liu. It's a great way to finish the show. Thank you all, Professor Li, Professor Liu, Jingjing. Thanks so much for being here, and thank you for talking China. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Professor Lee, bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. See you. Yeah.